Greetings everybody. In this video we're going to walk through our wild 6-month odyssey to purchase the house in Maine. So if you want to learn about all the problems we overcame and maybe some pitfalls that you can avoid when you're trying to buy a property, stay tuned. Hi, I'm Jason.
Hi, and I'm Lauren.
And this is Never Stop Building, where we are documenting the progress of our homestead build-out in Maine, and where I also share carpentry, woodworking, and timber framing videos. So as I mentioned, it took about 6 months to go from starting our house search to closing on this property. And there were at least 4 times where it looked like it was going to disintegrate. But we actually did it, as you saw in the last video, and the whole story is a crazy tale of perseverance and just not stopping. Never stop calling your real estate agent. So let's go through the whole story from the beginning. So we've been living in Colorado for a little while, and we always knew that we were going to try to get a property so we could build it out for the family and homestead and do all that stuff. And so we've been saving money and figured that this past summer would be the time that we start our search. We were going to wait until we had enough money saved for a down payment, and we were casually looking at Zillow listings. And then the plan was to go take a road trip through the Northeast after my sister's wedding and see all the places that we wanted, and then make a decision. You know, it doesn't always work out as you plan.
Now, I'm kind of a Zillow junkie anyways, so I'm just constantly always liking houses that are on Zillow.
Yeah.
But, as we started thinking about houses that we actually wanted to buy in Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, I was tagging them, and I found this one in Mercer that I thought was really cool. And I showed it to Jason, and you were like, "Eesh, that's kind of rough." And it was, but I just had a really good feeling about it. So, okay, we definitely want to take a look at this house, but we also knew that the market was pretty hot, and we probably needed to look sooner rather than later, just so in case, right? Like, all these houses were going on and off the market so quickly that it was really important to us that, like, if we saw something that we liked, that we could jump on it.
It wasn't just that house. We also found lots of different houses that fit our Zillow saved search criteria. What was the criteria? It was at least 10 acres, built before 1930. I think the keyword had barn.
1 bathroom.
Oh yes, barn demanded that there be a bathroom. We were starting to get excited. We were seeing things in our price range, and so my mother, who's a real estate agent, I called her and I said, if we're going to get serious about this, we need a real estate agent in Maine. And I knew that she could refer me to somebody up there. So that's how we got connected to Heather. And so we sent off our criteria and an email that basically said, like, this is what we're looking for, and here's an example property, the Mercer place, a link to the Mercer place. Like, will this one work pretty well?
So Heather, being the great real estate agent that she is, she started to send us lots of different properties that were checking the boxes across our criteria. And for me, just to be honest, I was a little bit nervous about doing a full fixer-upper and on the fence about whether we wanted something a little bit more move-in ready or, needed the work. But Heather, sent us a bunch of different properties for us to look at, and we started building out a spreadsheet and being able to track those things. Like, okay, well, this one has a lot of land, but this one has the really great barn, and just started to really think through what our criteria were.
Yeah, I liked the Mercer place, but I would say to you, like, are you sure you want to get in this again? Because we had done a renovation in Baltimore where we lived in an unfinished house, and I didn't want to have to deal with the inevitable stresses that come from that. So I really wanted to make sure Lauren was on board with potentially moving into an old home.
But I guess I don't learn my lesson because I felt really good about the Mercer place.
So Heather turned us on to 2 potential lenders, and we started the financial pre-qualification process. And I think one of the lenders was going to work out for us, and the other one just fell away. And we were reviewing all the homes that Heather was selling us, and she actually offered to go out to the Mercer place and do some videotaping and film it. So when we watched the videos, I think we were kind of taken aback. It was definitely rough, but it also looked really interesting, and we couldn't shake this huge forested acreage and the fact that it had been logged before, and it just had like a grandeur to it, right?
Yeah, I mean, even though it was clearly a project, it just had a lot of potential, and you could see it, and it hadn't been messed with. So a lot of times we would look at
That's
houses,
right.
and you know, they've been renovated in the 80s to some, I don't know, somebody's taste, not ours. And it just, this was like a clean slate. We could look at it, you could see the canvas, you could see the opportunity there to make it what we wanted it to be.
So we were getting very excited at this point. We saw these videos. We thought it was a project, but we would want to move on with it. And this whole time throughout the house buying process, I was like losing my entire mind, thinking that anytime we were interested in a house, in the next day someone would walk in cash and snap it up from us. So I couldn't get excited about a house. So anytime we were interested in something, we were like frantically trying to figure out, like, do we want this? Are we going to make this happen? All right, let's make an offer. Let's just do it. Let's get it. So I was, let's get this house immediately. Lauren wanted to see.
I wanted to see the house before we bought it.
Yes, yeah. And she wanted to see some other ones. She was excited about the Mercer place, but knew that if she didn't see the house and see a couple others, that she could never live with herself, thinking we might have made a mistake. So I called Heather. I said, Heather, let's write an offer on the Mercer place, and we'll get flights. We'll go out and see the house, and we'll take it from there. And very quickly we got the offer submitted, and we scheduled a flight, I rented a car, got some hotels, and we found some other properties that she had suggested that were also worth looking at. One of which was, the pictures looked so good that I was ready to pull the offer on the Mercer place and buy that sight unseen, which you talked me down from doing. But so we went out to Maine. We saw this house that I was going to buy sight unseen. It had actually looked way rougher than the pictures. It needed a whole bunch more work. It had a bunch of water damage. And so we were a little bummed at that, because that felt like a second option. But then when we toured the Mercer place, it was like immediately, wow, this is something special. Huge 10-foot granite basement, just kind of a grandeur to it, a massive brick beehive stove thing.
The structure was really strong. Like, everything was very straight.
Yes.
Which was not the case in the other property we had looked at in Farmington. So.
And the house actually looked better than the pictures. It looked really rough in the pictures and the video, but when we actually were in it, it seemed serviceable. And what we thought was a bunch of water damage was actually just old water stains that were from years prior. And the roof was intact. It was raining when we visited. There was no leaks. So we were like, this is better than it seems. And I think it was that night we went to that brewery, and we were like, are we going to do this? And we said, we'll go back tomorrow, look at it again, take some more pictures and video, and if we like it still, we'll, proceed. Because we always had the option within a certain period of time to pull our offer if we didn't like it. We flew back from Maine. We were very excited. We're moving forward, and this is when the crazy problems all started. First problem, the bank came back and said, oh, we can't finance that property after all, because 80% of the land is in forest protection. And they don't want to have weird land right issues. Okay, so what we did was we managed to convince the sellers to split the property into 2 deeds.
Right.
13 acres or some amount would go with the house, and the rest of the acreage would be a parcel of land that we would buy with the cash down payment. We had saved up a decent nest egg, so we could do a very small down payment on the house and use the rest of the cash to buy the land, which wasn't valued super high. And it was great that the sellers agreed with doing this strange split situation. And then the bank was okay with that. They kind of didn't want to know about the land purchase. They were just going to finance the house. So while we were working out the split land deal, it looked like that might not happen, and we were trying to figure that out. The listing agent pitched to the sellers that we do an owner financing arrangement where they would basically extend the credit and we would pay them the monthly payment with no bank involved. And this is about the time that we realized that it wasn't just one seller. There were 5 children of the deceased original owners. It was an estate sale of some sort. So it wasn't just a single seller that had to make a decision. It was 5 children. Well, they're adults. I mean, it was 5 people. So it seemed like the sellers were interested in the owner financing, and they had asked one of the sellers, and it sounded like a good plan, and we were going to that appointment, and we were so excited. We were on the phone frantically, like, let's write the offer, let's get it, in writing. We got to do this, because this was a dream. At the time, we didn't know how we were going to get the financing. We didn't know all the stuff we were going to need to do, and if we could owner finance it, then we just wouldn't have to deal with a bank. It would be our place. And then 2 days later or so, that fell through because one of the children said no, they would not budge on the owner financing, which is understandable because, they wanted to get the money from selling the house, not wait 30 years to get paid for it.
Right, and they are assuming some level of risk by...
That's right.
Doing owner financing.
So that's probably the first time it seemed like the deal was sunk. And we were bummed that we couldn't get owner financing, but we thought, okay, well, we'll just figure out regular financing, even if it's more difficult. And that was when we got a builder to inspect the place. We did our well and septic inspection. Our friend John built out a plan for a new septic field because it seemed like there was definitely going to have to be at least a septic field installed. We got that quoted. We did all our due diligence on the property while we still had the opportunity. And also the bank wanted to see a lot of this stuff to know that they were going to loan money onto a house that was going to burn down, basically. So then problem 2 was getting homeowners insurance because nobody wanted to insure a historic home. It was either, there's too much wood or, who knows what the paint is. We don't know anything about it. It's they wanted it to be this modern, normal house. And that problem was easy to overcome. We just kind of ground it out. Eventually I found an insurance agent that was able to insure it. But, the problem started mounting.
The lesson there is just be persistent.
So while we were getting the insurance and the due diligence, the bank was doing all the underwriting, and that was taking a lot longer than we expected. So we had to do multiple extensions of the closing date. I think we moved the closing date from it was originally May 26th. I think it moved to June 30th, and we had to rewrite the whole offer in 2 separate offers to classify the land separate from the house. But things were moving, and basically we got to a stage where all we needed to do was get an appraisal. And if they appraised the 13 acres and the house at the offer price, then we could get this place. I was frantic. I would call Heather or text her every day. Did the appraisal happen today? Or, did they return the appraisal? Did they return the appraisal? Did they return the appraisal? I didn't hear anything. And then I got an email from the loan officer that said, give me a call. And she said, the appraisal came in a little bit lower. It was much, much lower. And the lady that appraised it really did not see the value in the historic home or the potential, which maybe that's not her job, but what we know now is that she just didn't seem to care about the house the way the eventual different appraiser did. And we were going to be on the hook for, redoing all the paint, redoing all the walls, electrical and plumbing inspections, if not replacement, all to get it to a value that was still below the offer price. We were disappointed that it didn't appraise, right? It was like a good day.
I mean, I think that was really disappointing because
Yeah.
then it meant that we either had to bring more money to the table or what was our other option? Like, if we didn't have money to close, or we had to I mean, the answer was always just more money to either be able to make those repairs.
What we found out was that when we were getting all the quotes and running them through this bank, because we had decided after the appraisal, we were like, okay, well, we'll just figure out what we need to do to fix this house and get it to appraise and finance the repairs and da-da-da-da. We found out that we couldn't finance the repairs. And I think this is maybe one mistake that we made, is we didn't really dig into the program, the loan program, deep enough to know what we were getting into, because we thought it was going to be more of a construction loan situation.
Which is what we had at our place in Baltimore.
Yeah.
So,
whereas they were not planning on loaning us the money to make these repairs, I guess, which would end up being sort of like a personal loan. It was going to come out of the appraised value. Long story short, the little bit of hope we had the day I talked about the appraisal, it just vanished the next day. They were like, well, even if you were to fix it, it still wouldn't appraise. So we were going to have to bring, tens of thousands of dollars additional cash, which we did not have, to repair this house, basically do a full renovation, not have the joy of doing it over the years, to our standards. So that was, I think that was number 3 sinking of the deal potential, and that was a pretty hard one. But I was not deterred. Heather kind of talked us down from quitting. We were really close. I started looking for like preservation loans or grants or anything like that. Heather found one bank and they kind of ghosted us. They had the same thing. They saw the house and they didn't want to make a deal. And then we finally found a local community bank that they were interested in taking on the project. And it was great for 2 reasons. One, they were going to consider the whole property, all 200 acres, and the house as one package deal. So we wouldn't have to do this weird double deed situation. And 2, doing that allowed us to get a whole other appraisal, which hopefully we could maybe do some polishing and fix some stuff, and then it would hit our offer price. So we had to start from the beginning again with a different bank. All the financial information again, filling out all the forms, submitting all the tax records. It went to underwriting.
and at this point, it's June, right? And we had started this process in March.
Yeah.
So, just to give you a sense of timeline.
All right, so now we're excited again. We have a new bank. We've given them all the paperwork. Things seem to be moving along. But then we get a call from the new loan officer, and what did she say?
She's like, your debt to income ratio is too high. And we were like, it's just like wind out of the sails again.
Yeah, but at this point we knew, at this point it was starting to become clear that every single step of this was going to be a problem. So we were like, okay, how can we figure this out?
Right. And so as we're talking through the paperwork and like what they were looking at, she mentions that she has us on a 15-year loan. And we were like, time out. If you put us on a 30-year loan, does that change the debt to income ratio? And she's like, let me do some math. And they take it back, they redo the numbers, and lo and behold, now that we're a 30-year loan, they were like, you qualify.
So that was a night. I mean, that was okay. We solved that problem, and we're back in the game. Now it's time to do appraisal number 2, and I'm freaking out because I'm not convinced adding all the acreage back in is going to make it appraise. I already know all the problems that were found with the first appraisal, and I remember talking to Heather. I gave her the good news that we got this exception for the debt to income ratio, and we were scheming, how are we going to make this house appraised? How are we going to clean it up a little bit? Because several of the rooms had plaster falling off the ceilings, didn't really have many appliances, there was water damage on some of the walls from old leaks, and it really just, it did not look like a house that you could move right in and live. It needed some sort of polish. Yeah, and the sellers did not really want to do any of these repairs because it was an inheritance. They didn't want to spend money. They were content to just let the house sit and wait for somebody to buy it whenever, even if it crumbled into dust. So anything that we needed to do to make this happen was on us. And we found a handyman that was going to come in and put drywall panels up, and he went and looked at the place, and that we were waiting on an estimate from him, and we were thinking, okay, this might work. We'll get this guy to do some renovations, and it'll appraise better. And he comes back and says, oh, I can't give you an estimate. It's going to be hourly. There's no way to estimate that, and you're kind of, that's what it is. And we didn't want to just pay a blank check to get this house fixed, and he was already planning on doing a lot more work than I would have done. Put up drywall when we could just put up wall paneling. And so I'm researching this wall paneling, and I see, it's $11 a sheet, and the gears are turning, and I text Heather and I say, what if I went on a mission to put up some paneling real quick under, the cover of secrecy or whatever. So Heather and I hatched this plan for what we called Operation Lipstick, where I would go to Maine, rent a vehicle, put a bunch of paneling up, spruce up this house, make it look presentable, stage the heck out of it, and we would get it to appraise by hook or by crook. So I run back to the house and start booking flights and...
Yeah, and this is classic Jason. He's got a project, and now he's full steam ahead, making all these phone calls, trying to arrange, Home Depot visits, all of that. I'm on Facebook trying to find appliances that are $75 or less that we could just put in the house to make it look a little bit nicer and more lived in.
So I get my flight booked. I figure out a cheap hostel to stay the first night. I'm going to get up really early. I'm going to go to Home Depot. I'm going to pick up these appliances. I'm going to go to the site. I go to rent a car. There's not a single car available in all of Maine. I went to 3 different car rental websites. I don't know what was going on, but there was no car rental. But, okay, I know you can rent a truck from Home Depot, but you can't reserve the truck. So I reserved the van. And then we have another problem. I arrived in Charlotte for my transfer, and I called to confirm the van. I'm trying to be on top of everything. I'm glad I did, because they said, oh, we don't have any record of that reservation, which I made online. Thanks, Home Depot. And I'm losing it, because I tell the guy, listen, man, I flew half across the country to do this quick work. Do you have a truck? Can you please just hold the truck till tomorrow morning? I'll be there first thing when you open at 6 a.m. And he did a solid. He held the truck. So, okay, we got the truck figured out. No problems. I get to Maine. I slink in and out of this hostel. I think the flight was delayed, so I got in at midnight. I slink out at 5 a.m., go to Home Depot. All the tools I was trying to rent were out, so I bought an air compressor that came with a nail gun. Loaded up the truck with wall paneling, furring strips, fasteners, stuff like that, and then drove 3 different places in Maine to get a crappy refrigerator, a washer and dryer that didn't always work, and a kitchen stove, which fell over while I was driving and shattered the glass, so I ended up having to fake that with a piece of plexiglass spray painted black on the inside. So I made it to the house, and Heather, amazing, she decided that she would come out and help with this. She helped me pull down old plaster and sweep up mouse droppings and hang contact paper, and we refinished the laundry room. We had to put paneling and ceiling on there, box in some old plumbing, put down a piece of carpet, push the washer and dryer in there. There was a back room that needed a whole new ceiling. There was a couple other places that ceiling tiles needed to be replaced. I made friends with a neighbor who was kind enough to loan me his gardening equipment, so I completely landscaped the front of the house, cut down a couple trees, trimmed a huge pine tree. We put up American flag, we painted some of the trim. I really wanted the appraisal to roll in and be like, oh, this is an old house, but it's a lived-in house. It's a little worn, but it's not falling apart. And I think we succeeded, because the appraiser was coming by while I was on my first flight out on Thursday. So I landed in Charlotte again, and I got news that, yeah, it seemed to go well. He didn't really comment on the walls. He thought it was cool that there was appliances in there. Showed him the basement, showed him the furnace. So I'm like, oh, thank goodness. I think this is going to work out. I mean, I still didn't believe it at the time, but thought it might happen.
Yeah.
And so then we're waiting for the appraiser to file his report, and the due date comes and goes, and we're like, where is this appraiser? Where's the appraisal report?
Right. And on top of that, our loan officer just went on vacation without telling anybody. And so we were...
Oh, that's right. That happened that week. Yeah.
Yeah. And so on top of that, we were like, well, who's our contact? When are we going to get the appraisal? Who do we follow up with? But luckily somebody else from the bank stepped in, and, you know, we find out later that they've been sending us emails that we haven't been getting because they've been going straight to my spam folder, because they send everything through a secure portal. And
the problem was, so yeah, we had our loan officer on vacation. We find out the results of the appraisal like 3 days before we're supposed to close, and basically it did appraise this time, and we were glad. It actually appraised a little bit above the offer price, but now the clock is ticking, and we found out that we needed to have a new well inspection because we've been doing this for so long that the old well inspection was more than 90 days old, and we found out that we needed to confirm the furnace worked because the appraiser never turned it on, and he'd have to come back out and deal with his schedule to confirm that. And we needed to bring a little more money to the table to do the escrow holdback for the septic.
right.
And on top of all that, we found out the sellers didn't want to, they were done. They did not want to sign another extension so that we could move the closing date again. I don't know how many times we moved it. So we get all this stuff done, and I'm like so frustrated now, and you know, like, I'm calling the new loan officer, I'm calling everybody I can, and I'm just like, all right, I'm gonna just sit down and work these problems one after the other. So I make friends with the new loan officer just by explaining this ordeal, and she manages to convince the underwriter that we can wait till after closing to do the well inspection. Okay, so problem one solved, or whatever problem this is. Now I have to deal with the furnace. So because I made friends with the neighbor using his lawn equipment, he turned me on to the furnace guy for the area. So I call him frantically, say, can you do an emergency service on this furnace? Here's the whole situation, da-da-da-da-da-da. And thankfully he rearranged his schedule. He went out there early the next morning, texted me a picture of the receipt that showed he serviced it, it works. I emailed that off to the loan officer, and then they managed to convince their underwriters again to use that information to waive that inspection. And they were gonna have to have the appraiser come back out even with the service, but they got over that. And then I had to call the Bank of Mom because we weren't gonna let a little bit of money sunder this deal at this point. So we did a short-term loan to get through closing for the escrow holdback. Thank you, Mom. And now that and this was like over the course of 2 days, I think, I was just hammering on these problems. And, you know, this is probably the last time, this is almost the deal was sunk, the fourth time, because the last piece of the puzzle was to get the sellers to sign this extension, because then otherwise our offer would just be floating in the wind and anybody could come in and snatch the house. And so I sleuthed and found one of the children, the ringleader of the five. I found his phone number on one of those like cell phone search websites. A couple phone numbers were not his, but he eventually answered the phone, or called me back, I think. I left him a message. And I was like, man to man, I just basically begged him, listen, look, I fixed the well thing, I fixed the furnace thing. The bank is not jerking you around. There's all these little things we got to deal with. I wish we could just get in one room and talk this out. You know, I made friends with him when he visited while I was doing this renovation lipstick program. And so he was more sympathetic, and he's a concrete guy and I'm a carpenter, so we kind of bonded over that. And he said, okay, I'll get the kids to sign it. I understand. We really want you to have this place. It's just dealing with the banks, all this, you know, it's been months. Oh my goodness. And then it was, what was it, like another 3 days of insanity, because just get them to sign. Did they sign yet? Did they sign yet? Did they sign yet? And they ultimately did sign the extension the evening of the day the offer was going to expire. Okay, so we could breathe. With most of the hurdles behind us, we just had to wire all the money to the closing company and bank. Of course, that is never easy. There was a limit on the daily wire amount, and had I known, it would have been easier. And that's not much of a problem. I just had to send 2 wires, but I was my stress increased exponentially as each little tiny problem came up as we were nearing closing. But we got the money to the bank. We went down to the UPS store and notarized and signed all the documents. And all the children showed up to closing. Our agent made sure of that. And finally, from the end of March to the end of August, it was the end of August, right?
Yeah.
We finally closed on this crazy place. Oh my goodness.
So this was just a crazy experience from start to finish. But I think what might be helpful is if we both shared like what the lessons we learned from this experience and what tips would we have for anybody who is in a similar position. So my first lesson from this whole experience is, you have to find the real estate agent that's going to fight for you. Heather was our champion from start to finish. She never gave up, and she just gave it all. And we were flabbergasted and wowed by her persistence, and it helped us persist.
And yeah, that's the biggest lesson for me was there's just nothing that can't be solved if you keep banging your head against the ground. I mean, the number of times that it looked like it wasn't going to happen, and we just broke down the problem and figured out what the solution was, and just worked it and worked it and worked it. I sort of feel like anything's possible now that we were able to do this, because every time there was an issue, we just figured out how we could solve it and move past it.
And I do think ultimately it was helpful going with a smaller bank because there was a more personal touch. So when Jason needed to call somebody, it was like the same person he could call each time to try and resolve issues. I don't know that we would have had the same experience going with like a Wells Fargo or a Bank of America.
Yes. And another thing that you should do when you're trying to buy a property, honey is better than vinegar. I felt in some cases like I was like a Russian spy, developing assets, using the assets, because everybody I interacted with, I talked to, I made friends with, and that paid off because you can ask them to go the little extra mile, or ask the underwriters again to check something, or I got the neighbor's phone number, so I was able to call him and have him check on the house or find out about the furnace guy. You don't know how much people are willing to help you if you're nice to them and then you kind of ask them for a little help.
That's really sweet.
Thank you for listening to our crazy tale of how we got this house, and hopefully it hasn't deterred you from getting a property of your own. Just keep persisting. And if you're interested in following along as we get ready to move and build out and repair and make this house into our home, please subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions about the whole home buying process, leave a comment down in the comment section below. And as always, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.